They laughed, all of them. My own children, sitting in the house I built with my bare hands. They thought I was bluffing when I said I was leaving. But the day those legal papers arrived, suddenly, no one was laughing anymore. My name is Margaret Collins, and I'm 68 years old. For most of my life, I was what people call the dependable one, the woman who never said no, who smiled through disrespect, who kept her family together while quietly falling apart inside. I live, or rather used to live, in a quiet town just outside Charleston, South Carolina. Our old house sat near the marshes, where the air smelled like salt and memory. It was my husband's dream home, though he passed 15 years ago, leaving me with 2 adult children, Daniel and Christine, who, somewhere along the way, forgot who their mother was. When my husband, Paul, died, I didn't ask for anything. I gave Daniel his father's truck. Christine got the savings account for her kids' college, and I kept the house, not because of its value, but because it held the echoes of my life. Every scratch on the floor, every faded family photo on the wall, it was my world. But as the years passed, the visits became shorter, the calls rarer. Until one day, it wasn't my home anymore. It was theirs. It started subtly. Daniel would visit and say, "Mom, you should think about downsizing. Big house for one person, huh?" Christine would laugh and agree. "Yeah, Mom. You don't need all this space. Maybe you can move closer to us." At first, I thought it was concern. But then came the comments, the ones laced with mockery. "You wouldn't even survive without us, Mom. You don't understand finances anymore. Let us handle the paperwork. You're getting older, Mom. Maybe it's time to stop pretending you're independent." Each word felt like a small cut, invisible but deep. I remember one evening, I overheard them talking in the living room when they thought I was asleep. Daniel said, "Once she signs over the deed, we can finally sell this place. Split the money." Christine laughed. "You think she'll notice? She probably doesn't even read the fine print anymore." That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, my hands trembling. I looked at the old wedding picture of me and Paul, his eyes, gentle and kind. And for the first time in years, I spoke aloud to him. "Paul, they've forgotten who I am. They think I'm weak." That night, I made myself a promise. If they wanted to see how weak I was, I'd show them just how strong I could still be. A few weeks later, Christine called and asked if I'd sign some routine property papers. I smiled and told her to bring them over. When she arrived, I played the part, frail, forgetful, dependent. But what she didn't know was that I had already met Mr. Holloway, an old friend of Paul's, a lawyer who had helped us buy the house decades ago. He was retired now, but when he heard my story, he said something that stayed with me. "Margaret, you've spent your whole life giving. Maybe it's time to protect what's left of you." That one sentence reignited a spark inside me. So, when Daniel and Christine handed me those routine papers, I signed them, but not before quietly filing my own paperwork the week before. You see, I had already changed my will, and I had already contacted a real estate lawyer of my own. The house was no longer theirs to take. In fact, they didn't even know what was coming. That night, after they left, I stood by the window. The moonlight poured into the living room, shining on the framed photo of my children when they were little, Daniel holding Christine's hand, both smiling like they used to. Tears filled my eyes, not out of sadness, but out of resolve. "You laughed when I said I was leaving," I whispered. "Let's see who laughs when the papers arrive." I woke up the next morning feeling different, lighter, yet sharper. For the first time in years, my thoughts were clear. I brewed my coffee, the same way Paul used to, black, strong, slightly bitter, and watched the sun rise from the kitchen window. It looked like any ordinary morning, but inside, I knew something extraordinary had begun. I had already mailed the documents to Mr. Holloway the previous evening. The new will, the property protection clause, and the sale authorization, all properly notarized, all sealed. The house that my children had mocked as too big for me was no longer in my name. It now belonged to the Collins Trust, a legal entity I set up quietly with Mr. Holloway's help. No one could touch it without my permission, not even my own children. Over the next few days, Daniel and Christine kept visiting, their tone changing ever so slightly. Daniel started checking the mailbox, pretending it was for my bills. Christine would ask casually, "Mom, did any documents from the county office come for you?" They were fishing, but I played along, soft-spoken, smiling, pretending to be the same woman they underestimated. I let them think they were still in control, but behind that smile, I was already planning my next move, to leave. I didn't tell anyone at first. I started packing small things, a few clothes, photo albums, Paul's wristwatch, and the old recipe book he loved. Every night, I wrapped another memory in tissue paper and placed it in an old suitcase under my bed. It felt strange, freeing yet heartbreaking. That house had been my cage and my comfort all at once. One night, I sat in the living room, running my fingers over the piano keys. Dust had gathered on them. Christine's daughter used to play here, years ago. But now, the laughter that once filled these rooms was gone, replaced by whispers, arguments, and the sound of betrayal. That's when I decided I wasn't just leaving the house. I was leaving their version of me behind. A few days later, Christine came over with a forced smile. "Mom, Daniel's been talking to a realtor friend," she said, stirring her coffee. "He can help you sell this place easily. We'll handle everything for you." I looked at her and smiled kindly. "That's very sweet, dear. You know I trust you both." She grinned, satisfied. But then she added something that pierced my heart. "It's just you're not getting any younger, Mom. We'd rather deal with all this before it's too late." Before it's too late. Those words echoed in my mind like a warning bell. I excused myself and went upstairs, locking the door behind me. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at the woman looking back, white hair pulled neatly into a bun, wrinkles tracing stories time refused to erase. I wasn't fragile. I was tired, yes, but not broken. And in that reflection, I saw the version of me that had once built a family, nursed 2 children through sickness, buried a husband, and still managed to stand tall. They saw an old woman. I saw a survivor. That evening, I called Mr. Holloway. He answered in his calm, gravelly voice. "Margaret, everything's filed. The trust is active. Once they receive the notice, they'll realize the property isn't under your name anymore." Felt a strange mix of peace and anticipation. "How long until they find out?" I asked. 2, maybe 3 days. You'll get a copy of the documents too." 3 days. 3 days until my children's laughter turned into disbelief. On the 3rd day, Daniel showed up early in the morning, holding a letter with a red seal. He looked pale, furious, confused. Christine followed him in, waving another copy in her hand. "Mom," Daniel shouted. "What the hell is this?" "What's what, dear?" I asked gently, sipping my tea. Christine's voice trembled. "The house, it says it's under some trust. It says we're not beneficiaries." I looked up, meeting their eyes. Calm. Unshaken. "That's correct," I said softly. "This house doesn't belong to anyone anymore. Not you, not me. It belongs to the trust. I only live here." Daniel's face turned red. "You're out of your mind, Mom. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Yes," I said. "For the first time in years, I do." The silence that followed was thick and electric. Their arrogance cracked, replaced by panic. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. They stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame shook. I sat there, alone, the quiet hum of the refrigerator filling the air. And though my hands trembled, a smile found its way to my lips. "You laughed when I said I was leaving," I whispered. "But now, I think you finally understand what that means." The day after Daniel and Christine stormed out, the house felt heavier than ever. Every creak of the floor, every echo in the hallway seemed to remind me of what I'd lost, not my home, but my family. For hours, I sat in silence, clutching my cup of tea until it went cold. A part of me wanted to call them, to explain that this wasn't revenge. It was survival. But then I remembered their laughter, how they mocked me when I'd said I was leaving. No, I thought. Let them sit with the silence for once. That evening, I began to truly pack. I took my time, folding clothes neatly, wrapping frames in old newspapers, and packing the smallest box last, Paul's belongings. His watch, his pipe, the letter he wrote to me before his heart surgery, the one I still couldn't bring myself to reread. As I placed the letter in the box, I whispered, "Paul, I hope you'd be proud of me. I'm finally doing something for myself." The next morning, I drove to Savannah, Georgia, 3 hours away. It wasn't far, but it felt like a world apart. A quiet apartment near the river had been waiting, arranged through Mr. Holloway's friend. Simple, small, and mine. For the first time in decades, I had no one asking where I was going or what I was spending. Just peace. And freedom. It felt strange and beautiful. 2 days later, my phone started ringing nonstop. First Daniel, then Christine, then Daniel again. I ignored the first few calls, but by the 10th one, curiosity got the better of me. When I finally picked up, Daniel's voice cracked through the speaker. "Mom, what did you do? Do you even realize the financial mess you've created?" "For who, dear?" I asked calmly. "For us. You can't just take everything away. That house was our inheritance." "It was never yours," I said quietly. "It was my life. And now, it's my peace." He hung up. No goodbye. Just silence. Christine called next. Her tone was softer, more careful. "Mom, Daniel's upset. You know how he gets. But maybe we can talk about this? Maybe we can fix it." "There's nothing to fix, sweetheart. I didn't do this to punish you. I did this to protect what's left of me." Her voice quivered. "You're being manipulated, Mom. That lawyer, he's taking advantage of you." I smiled faintly. "Funny. That's what I thought about the two of you." The line went quiet. Then she said something that made my stomach tighten. "You'll regret this, Mom. You think you've won, but you haven't." And just like that, the warmth in her voice vanished. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, listening to the gentle hum of the river outside my new apartment. The city lights danced on the water. For a moment, I felt young again, like the world was wide open, waiting for me. But beneath the peace, there was fear. A quiet one. The kind you feel when you realize the people you love might actually hurt you, not with hands, but with cruelty. I locked my door that night, just in case. A week passed. No calls. No texts. Just silence. Until one morning, I received a letter. No return address. Inside, there was a photo, a picture of my old house. The front door was open. The caption scrawled in Daniel's handwriting. "This won't last forever." My hands trembled. For a moment, I thought of calling the police. But what would I even say? That my son sent me a photo of my own house? I placed the photo inside a drawer, took a deep breath, and tried to focus on the new life I was building. I joined a small community center nearby, mostly retirees like me. We cooked together, painted, told stories. For the first time in years, I laughed without guilt. One afternoon, I was helping a woman named Evelyn paint a landscape when she said, "You've got kind eyes, Margaret, but they've seen too much hurt, haven't they?" I smiled softly. "Maybe, but I think they're finally learning to see peace." A few days later, my phone buzzed again, but this time, it was Mr. Holloway. His voice was urgent. "Margaret, I need you to come to my office immediately. It's about your children." My heart sank. "What happened?" "They've filed a petition," he said. "They're claiming you're mentally unfit to manage your own affairs." The world around me went still. The brush slipped from my fingers, leaving a smear of blue paint on the table. They hadn't stopped at betrayal. Now they were trying to take me. When Mr. Holloway told me what Daniel and Christine had done, I felt something inside me crack, not in anger, but in disbelief. My own children had filed a mental incompetency claim against me. They were trying to prove that I wasn't of sound mind, that everything I had done, the trust, the will, the move, had been manipulated by someone else. For a moment, I just sat there, frozen. The words "mentally unfit" echoed in my head like a curse. "They think I've lost my mind," I whispered. Mr. Holloway looked at me with compassion. They're desperate, Margaret. They want control. But don't worry, we'll fight this.
Fight.
That word sounded strange on my tongue. I hadn't fought for anything in years. But now I had no choice. The following weeks felt like a blur of paperwork, appointments, and quiet dread. I was called in for evaluations, doctors asking if I remembered what day it was, who the president was, what I had for breakfast. Each question felt like an insult, like they were stripping away my dignity piece by piece. One doctor, a young man barely older than my grandson, said gently, "Mrs. Collins, sometimes older people get confused. It's not your fault." I smiled politely and replied, "Son, I raised 2 children, ran a household, and buried a husband with my own hands. I'm many things, but confused isn't one of them." The day of the hearing arrived. It was held in a small courthouse in Charleston, the same city where I had built my entire life. I wore a simple navy blue dress and carried Paul's old handkerchief in my purse. Mr. Holloway sat beside me, calm and confident, while my children, my own flesh and blood, sat across the room, whispering to their lawyer. When the judge entered, I took a deep breath. This was it, the moment where I'd either lose everything or reclaim what they tried to take. Daniel went first. His voice was firm, rehearsed. "Your Honor, my mother has shown erratic behavior over the past few months. She's been manipulated into creating legal documents she doesn't understand." Christine followed, tears glistening in her eyes. "She's not herself anymore. She forgets things. She gets confused. We're just trying to protect her." I looked at her and felt a sting of grief. She was crying, but not for me. Those weren't tears of love. They were tears of guilt. Then it was my turn. I stood up slowly, my heart pounding, my hands shaking slightly. But when I spoke, my voice came out steady, like the tide, calm yet powerful. "Your Honor," I began. "For most of my life, I have been the kind of mother who said yes to everything. I cooked, cleaned, saved, and sacrificed so my children could have more than I ever did. When my husband died, I thought my children would take care of me the way I took care of them. Instead, they wanted to take from me." I paused, my throat tightening. The courtroom was silent. They think, because I'm old, I must be weak. They think wrinkles mean confusion and white hair means surrender. But they've forgotten who I am. I glanced at Daniel and Christine, both avoiding my eyes. I built that house brick by brick with my husband. I know what every paper I sign means. I didn't do it in confusion. I did it in clarity. The judge leaned forward, expression unreadable. "Mrs. Collins, do you have proof that you understood the legal documents at the time you signed them?" Mr. Holloway handed him a folder. Inside were notarized witness statements, my signed declarations, and the official trust documents. When the judge looked through them, the silence in the room felt endless. Finally, he spoke. "Based on the evidence provided and Mrs. Collins's testimony, I see no sign of incompetency. Case dismissed." The gavel struck, and in that single sound, that sharp crack, years of fear and humiliation shattered. Christine gasped softly. Daniel clenched his fists. I just sat there, letting the tears fall freely for the first time, not from pain, but from victory. Outside the courtroom, Christine approached me. Her voice trembled. "Mom, why did you do this to us?" I looked at her gently, but with a strength she didn't recognize. "Sweetheart, I didn't do this to you. I did it for me. Because somewhere along the way, you both stopped seeing me as a mother and started seeing me as a burden." Daniel muttered something under his breath, but Christine said nothing. For the first time, neither of them had the last word. When I got back to my apartment that night, I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window again. The city lights shimmered across the river, and I realized something. Freedom doesn't always come from youth. Sometimes, it comes when you finally stop being afraid of losing people who never valued you to begin with. It had been 6 months since the court hearing. 6 months since I walked out of that courthouse with my dignity, my sanity, and my peace intact. The trust remained untouched. The apartment by the river had become my new sanctuary, quiet, sunlit, filled with books, plants, and the scent of lavender candles. Each morning, I'd make tea, water my roses on the balcony, and whisper a quiet prayer of thanks. For the first time in decades, my life belonged to me. Sometimes, I still thought about Daniel and Christine. The silence between us had stretched into months, long and heavy, but strangely healing. There were moments when guilt tried to creep in, whispering that maybe I'd been too harsh. But then I'd remember their faces in that courtroom, the papers they filed, the lies they told, and the guilt would fade. No, I reminded myself. They needed to face the consequences of their greed. And I needed to live the rest of my life in peace. One chilly October morning, I received a text message. It was from a number I didn't recognize. It read, "Hi Mom, it's Christine." I froze, phone trembling in my hand. The last time I'd heard her voice, it was full of anger and disbelief. Now, seeing her name again, it stirred something deep inside, a mix of love, hurt, and hesitation. After a moment, I typed back, "Hello, Christine." Seconds later, her reply appeared. "Can I come see you? Please. Just once." I didn't respond immediately. I stared out the window at the golden leaves drifting down onto the riverbank. Part of me wanted to say no, to protect the fragile peace I had finally found. But another part of me, the mother P. So I wrote back one word, yes. She arrived the next afternoon. When I opened the door, for a moment, neither of us spoke. Christine looked older, her hair unkempt, her eyes swollen from crying. She clutched her coat tightly, like someone holding on to what little comfort they had left.
"Hi, Mom," she said softly. "Come in," he whispered.
She stepped inside, glancing around my small apartment. It was nothing like the big family home she'd known, but somehow it felt warmer. We sat at the table. I poured her tea. For a while, the only sound was the ticking of the clock. Finally, she said,
"I'm sorry."
The words were quiet, shaky, real. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the woman who betrayed me, but the daughter I once held in my arms, the little girl who used to cry when she scraped her knees. "Why now?" I asked gently. "Because I lost everything," she whispered. "Daniel's business went under. He blamed me. He doesn't talk to me anymore. I thought I had control over everything, Mom, but I was wrong." Tears filled her eyes. "You were right. About all of it." I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. Her fingers trembled. "Christine," I said softly, "I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted you to understand that love isn't ownership. You can't claim what you never respected." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I miss you, Mom. I really do." And in that moment, despite everything, I felt my heart soften. Because no matter how much pain she caused me, she was still my daughter. And I knew forgiveness, not bitterness, would be the true ending to my story. Before she left, she hugged me tightly. It was the first time in years that her embrace felt real, not forced, not guilty. She whispered, "Thank you for still being here." When the door closed behind her, I stood there for a long time, feeling both heavy and light. Not everything had healed, but something had shifted. Sometimes, closure doesn't come through revenge. It comes through understanding. That night, I sat by the window again, watching the river reflect the city lights. I thought about my journey, from the laughter that mocked me, to the silence that strengthened me, to the peace that finally found me. And I realized something simple, something I wished I had known years ago. Sometimes, the most powerful thing a woman can do is walk away, quietly, firmly, and without looking back. They laughed when I said I was leaving, but when the papers arrived, they finally understood. I wasn't leaving out of weakness. I was leaving to reclaim the woman they forgot I was. Never underestimate the strength of a woman who has finally decided she deserves peace more than approval.